For decades, the fight for civil rights in America was defined by gridlock and physical struggle on the streets. Getting to a place where schools, housing, and basic protections were truly equal felt like an impossibly steep climb for millions. Against that backdrop, Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision of total racial unity was almost inconceivable to the establishment. It was a beautiful ideal, but to many, it looked like a dream that would never actually materialize. Then, decades later, a new voice broke through the noise. This leader pointed to the dream and convinced a fractured public that reaching it was entirely possible. The simple phrase, "Yes, we can," acted as a psychological wedge. Before policy could be written or laws passed, the populace actually had to believe they possessed the agency to break through generations of political stagnation. A vision this large couldn't be achieved by someone who only spoke about diversity from a distance. It required an executive who personally lived the complexities of the American identity. To understand how Barack Obama built a highly resilient, unifying worldview, we have to trace his geographic roots. Half of his lineage stretches back to the vast expanses and deep tribal histories of rural Kenya. That heritage then collided with his actual birthplace, the isolated, tropical, and heavily blended island culture of Hawaii. Navigating completely disparate worlds from the moment you are born creates what sociologists call multicultural synthesis. When your family tree spans continents, you develop an unparalleled level of socio-political empathy. You learn to translate between entirely different types of people. This ingrained synthesis acts as a psychological armor. When opponents launched political attacks, spread lies, or hurled personal insults, he didn't buckle. He had already spent a lifetime reconciling contrasting realities. That emotional endurance is exactly what allowed him to rise above a climate of negative sentiment and take the oath of office in front of the largest crowd in the Capitol's history. This multifaceted background functioned as the primary tool for bridging the nation's deepest demographic divides. Detractors frequently tried to box him in. They argued he was a famously charismatic public speaker, but suggested his capabilities ended at the podium, that he couldn't execute hard, decisive action. But the American executive branch is an immense, unforgiving machine. It wields singular authority over the military, federal agencies, and foreign policy. It requires someone who can direct massive structural forces. He expanded his role far beyond that of a speechwriter. He stepped into the heavy mantles of motivator, structural leader, and the ultimate defender of millions of citizens who relied on his administration for protection. And when it came time to put truth to power and walk the walk, the results were definitive. He ordered the high-risk military raid that successfully eliminated America's primary geopolitical target, Osama Bin Laden. He showed that you can use rhetorical inspiration to build a coalition and then immediately turn around and use that same mandate to execute the most difficult, concrete manifestations of global power. Early in his career, opponents tried to use the title community organizer to shame him, painting it as small, localized, and ultimately irrelevant to national politics. This shows how community organizing works. You identify disconnected individuals, find their common needs, and wire them into an actionable network. Rather than abandon that methodology, he scaled it, rapidly applying these exact mechanics across millions of voters spanning the entire United States. By applying this relentless, ground-up organizing work ethic to the highest office, he bypassed traditional political gatekeepers and governed directly through the coalition he built. Managing a global superpower requires a massive expansion of the logic used to mobilize a single neighborhood, the creation of unity from fracture. A core philosophy defined his tenure in the Oval Office, the profound idea that the elected leader should look, sound, and think like the immensely diverse electorate they represent. When he expressed the sentiment, "I am you, you are me," it was a direct rejection of systemic prejudice. It meant recognizing that the American identity is a continuous blending of millions of distinct personal histories. An unwavering belief in that shared collective identity was the primary fuel that drove him from a local organizer to the commander-in-chief. This belief cemented Barack Obama in history as America's 44th president. He and his family leave behind a tangible legacy of encouragement, proving to generations of citizens who might have felt sidelined that they too belong in the halls of power. Reaching the executive office showed that the American system has the capacity to reflect its own diversity, shifting the baseline for what future generations believe is achievable.